and thanks for joining me once again for Massalia Tales. In the previous episode, Hayasdan failed their attack on Ekbatana as the time limit ran out, with them trying to grind their way through the southern gate, making very poor use of their forces and perhaps deserving the loss. Gahaya made an attack against Epaphroditos, who had their city under siege. It was a major force and it had Epaphroditos outflanked. He had to fight himself to try and mitigate the damage, but in the end, our Mesopotamian cavalry, our mercenaries, proved very effective against the enemy, and we just about drove them off. Then our allies, the Saba Kingdom, showed up to help Epaphroditos, and with their help we could totally finish off the rest of Gahaya's army. In the west, Bendis is backing off from the Nervii in order to replenish and get reinforcements before his next push, and Cretheus is doing the opposite. He's pushing right against Hayasdan, drawing their main force, their heavily armed armies, into a decisive battle. Hayasdan's mobilization was absolute, giving them a distinct advantage in manpower and ability to project that force. Massalia was, in general, barely committed to its wars at all. The vast tracts of Massalian holdings in Africa, Iberia, Gaul and Cisalpina were not called upon to provide men or resources further to their usual tributes to the Republic. In all, it meant that it was not the Republic itself fighting wars, but wealthy generals raising their own armies of professional, landless troops, taking most of the risks and reaping most of the rewards. As such, Northern Europe was becoming the territory of Bendis, not the Republic, and the East was unquestionably ruled directly by Cretheus. It seemed that even the Timucoi was starting to lose its grip on the state. Cretheus and his phalangite-based army forms up, marching across this dusty open field towards the Hayasdan's main army, or should I say combination of armies, because actually right now it's just some of them, with the rest of their troops coming in as two reinforcement armies to this initial group. Lots of heavy infantry there, also some medium infantry, some of the trashy spear units which are relatively easy to kill. The enemy advancing right towards me as well, not necessarily going to wait for their reinforcements. They want to get this battle started apparently. As things begin, my ballistae will be able to hit the enemy from range, get some nice hits on some of these enemy heavy swordsmen, taking them out. Not going to be happy about that. Now, of course, I do have the option here of advancing towards the enemy to try and get the battle started faster, perhaps kill some of them before the reinforcements arrive, but I decided not to do that, and the enemy's reinforcements didn't catch up anyway. The main reason is I don't want to disrupt the pike formation. We want to be nice and stationary for maximum effect. So as the enemy get close, the battles begin. First, they send two squads of light cav onto my left. I respond with heavy shot cav and medium cav, thinking we'd be able to run them through, and we end up with quite a high casualty engagement. Both sides take a lot of losses. I suspect these enemy cav, although labelled as light cav, are actually pretty good in melee. Here, a second squad comes in, engaging the shock cav, and now that the shock cav are stationary, they're quite weak to that sort of thing, their stats mostly being in charge. So they're going to try and escape from that engagement. The medium cav are going with them, having already lost half their number fighting that first unit of light cav. It's not good at all. The shock cav have lost even more, and now spears are arriving to support. So really that didn't go very well. What is going well is the front line engagement, where the enemy is attacking with lots of their much heavier cav. If their heavier cav had come around the flanks, we definitely would have lost. But right here you see cataphracts trying to break through the pike phalanx, and the ones that aren't breaking through are being smashed with javelins. So overall, a terrible experience for those heavy cav. That's going great for me. So as you can see, the enemy have pretty much cleared up my left flank. They can come round the back. This unit of shock cav lost almost all its men in that engagement. Not good at all. I'm pulling them back so I can use them perhaps later in the battle. But right now, we have no reserve. This army formation only has a reserve once the peltasts run out of ammo and can turn around. So right now, the enemy are free to make these kinds of flank attacks, flanking my hoplites, my peltasts, and my archers with their light cavalry. All I have are my dogs as an actual reserve, so they're going to have to be let loose into these attackers to try and drive them off, and the dogs are actually pretty good against these light cav. Once the light cav stop moving and are bogged down amongst my line infantry, the dogs will start clearing them up, and we do manage to defeat them. We'll have to do something about their spears marauding around back there as well. Starting to see the first rout in the actual battle. Some of the enemy's low morale mercenaries turning back. You can see it's just a rain of javelins and arrows for their heavy infantry, and although their infantry are powerful, they're not going to do very much fighting a phalanx because they never get close enough to actually use their attack stats against me. So I'm not really losing anything. The enemy losing a lot to missile fire. Once the missiles run out, the pikes won't do very much back to the enemy, but we'll have them locked down, and they're not going to be using the power they have in their heavy infantry, so that's great. On the other flank, you can see I've basically given it up, trying to escape from battle with these cataphracts. I don't want to receive their charge, so my cav are just drawing them away, and Cretheus is going to have to go with his heavy cavalry to go and save them. I've now got some pelters ready for battle, and they sandwich this enemy spear unit between a dog charge and themselves, doing a lot of damage, and those spears are going to be defeated quite rapidly. The dogs are very good in melee. For some reason, regular infantry can't really bring them down, so that's all fine. We're finally starting to win out though on the left flank. My surviving cavalry finishing off one of the enemy's last light cavalry units, and with the enemy's heavy cavalry all committed into the fight, we are now going to have some form of a cavalry advantage there, just because the enemy aren't using their cavalry very well. Back with Cretheus, we've done a very dangerous but ultimately successful engagement against those cataphracts, bringing them down, just locking them in position with medium cavalry, and then Cretheus rear charging did manage to defeat them, routing them off the field. So that means we can now have a cavalry advantage on the right side as well. And right here you can see the enemy have brought a pike unit to attack my flank. I've had to move some of my hoplites out of formation to stop them, but what we've got there is a very exposed pike rear, so that's going to be easy to attack. The pelters filling the gaps in the line there to make sure the enemy doesn't get through. So those cavalry are just going to come back around and smash into the rear of those pikes. I thought that might rout them off the field, but the enemy has a disciplined army. They can take a rear charge even on an exposed pike unit. It does disrupt their formation and forces some of them forwards, dropping their pikes to fight with their swords in melee against my hoplites. But it doesn't break them, of course, and that's the important part that unit's going to fight on. Meanwhile, right on the other side of the battlefield, I tried to outflank the enemy with more pelters, and the enemy responded with heavy infantry, so I decided to just run away. If we can draw those heavy infantry to just chase the pelters, that's just as good as defeating them. They won't be taking part in the battle, and the pelters, of course, could not actually win the engagement if we stopped to fight. The engagement itself still going pretty well. Some of the enemy's worst infantry now fighting on the front lines, who the pikes might actually beat without missile support. Second charge comes in on those pikes over here, taking them out finally as their formation totally crumbles. Another cavalry charge preludes the break of these medium infantry. We've now totally won on the right flank and the left, so we can start folding around and doing some real damage. My spear is broken. No, I don't need one. I think I'll hang back now. The worst is over and my body isn't so eager for action anymore. I think I only had a few years of campaigning left in me when we started. This has gone on far longer than I expected. I think the easy retirement we hoped for might not happen, unless Hayasdan realise it is better to live in peace than die in shame. Given the behaviour of their best warriors, I think that's unlikely. Have you seen how they throw themselves onto our lines like wild animals? No, even wild animals have enough sense to avoid a wall of Sarissa. Those men are free in body but enslaved in mind. Not free to choose where and why they will die, only to speed up the process. With the flanks won, it's really just a matter of closing around the enemy's remaining troops. We've got cav marauding in the back, making sure their routing units don't have a very good time, and of course some of them can do rear attacks. These enemy cav escaping from the encirclement just as it comes in. A pretty good move from that enemy unit there, because they can now do exactly what they're doing here, circling back around to flank attack my encirclement here, hitting a pike unit in the flank with their super elite cav. A pretty nice move, but they are themselves going to be now swamped by my own cavalry, and of course the pike unit can start fighting them. It does have a bonus against cavalry, so overall that's an okay engagement. That unit disappears under my own troops. So now we are going to complete that encirclement and get the enemy's morale to start dropping as they realise they're in a really bad situation. Hitting them here with cavalry, not even that effective, because the enemy has so many high-level troops and legionaries who aren't particularly vulnerable to morale shocks, and of course are strong against cavalry. Making cavalry charges doesn't get as much progress towards actually breaking the enemy, so it's going to be up to the infantry to grind against the enemy, and we have them really surrounded there, so they are in trouble. Here, one small unit of spears actually getting a nice engagement against some of my cav who haven't noticed, or at least I haven't noticed, and told them to stop fighting those spears. There we go, my own spears going in to fight the enemy, the cav getting out of the way. Lots of the enemy starting to rout now, realising they're in trouble. The pikes smashing at them from behind as they try to escape, and in the distance there, my pelters still leading away some of the enemy's best infantry just to make sure they can't take part in the fight. So now, a short while later, the rest of the encircled enemy tried to escape as well with their comrades. There was still a way for them to get out of that encirclement, and my units were attacking them all the way, not doing much damage. They're so heavily armoured, they're difficult to kill, even while routing. But this fight for now is over. It's a heroic victory for Cretheus. Exactly what we needed. He sought that decisive engagement, and he seems to have got it here. So let's have a look at the actual results and how the enemy's armies are going to be faring after this battle. One drops right away. It was only a general in that third army, and the general died, so that army is just deleted right off the bat. Cretheus' army in absolutely amazing condition considering the scale of that battle, just cavalry taking losses. The enemy's armies in terrible condition, the first army in particular basically wiped out, but for their general, and as I choose to enslave captives, that general just gets wiped out as well. So overall, a fantastic engagement. We may have declawed Hayasdan there. That's their frontline momentum, definitely taken away. Hard to say if that's going to be the decisive battle of the war because they have so many numbers. There's plenty more armies around in the fog of war. But what's to stop me doing the same thing to those armies again if they do attack? So overall, pretty happy about how that's going. Now, Iceni come to me offering a non-aggression pact, and they also want a small payment. I actually forgot I hadn't done this myself. I did plan to get back into good relations with the Iceni because I want to attack the Carnutes in support of their war against the Carnutes, plus to just steal Carnutes territory. But before any of that, Hayasdan, come back for round 2. It turns out that those armies I was talking about were within 1 turn's distance. So they come back with a force that's even stronger than the one we just fought. The balance bar very far in their favour. Absolutely loads of heavy infantry and elite troops among the enemy's ranks. Cretheus, his army's still in really good condition, so it's not the end of the world, but we are down almost 2 cavalry units in terms of numbers, and the cavalry with this pike army are the really attacking force, the main part of the army that we need to do damage. So we're going to have to see what we can do with a very static front line. My first move is to go right up this hill at the start of the battle. The battlefield very similar to the last one, and the enemy's formation similar to the last one, with part of their army coming onto the field right away and the rest behind as reinforcements. And once again, the enemy are going to come right for us as the battle starts. Lots of cavalry in that first army. So we're going to form up on this hill with our usual pike wall, and as the enemy get close, the siege pieces will start doing their work, and I'm targeting their general here, and a shot actually lands right next to the general. We very nearly kill the man himself with a lucky shot, and he is going to scarper. He is not going to stick around to continue to advance under that fire, but the rest of his army still has to do it, so not leading by example, that particular general. So the enemy's army gets close, getting particularly close on my left here, where they've got some Jav Cav moving up, so close that my archers skirmish back behind the line. My own Javs and the archers are going to target that unit. So although it can do some damage to my heavy infantry there, it is going to lose if it just stands in front of the line to do its skirmishing. So I'm willing to let it just stand there and take my return fire, especially once those archers finish skirmishing and get set up. But they've got plenty more horsemen coming in, especially here on the left. Here we see the super heavy cav looking absolutely amazing in their full body armor with their cataphract horse armor as well. And they're going to be facing off against my medium cav, and really they have a gigantic cavalry advantage. These lightly armoured medium cav aren't going to be able to stop them if they do a full heavy charge on the left, so that's a bit of a tense situation. They are making things easy for me by sending some of their other cav to go and suicide on the pike phalanx, so thanks once again Hayasdan. They're not learning the lesson from the previous battle. I'm making life easy for them there though by accidentally not having a unit in pike phalanx, meaning they are going to be fighting with their swords. The unit's still really good in combat with their swords, but just not quite as good, especially against cav. So there we go, even their heavy cav suiciding, but other elements of their heavy cav make an attack. I try a counter charge, hitting the enemy with javs, and then a counter charge by the medium cav. Not really going to do anything, unfortunately. That super armoured unit's going to be able to blast its way through my cav. They're also making an attack on the flank. I've got a slight echelon, but it wasn't enough. The enemy still got behind the line. We really need them to stay away from the archers, because we need those archers to drive away several units of the enemy's missile cav who are standing in front of the line. The first unit there just going off. So back at the main fight, more suicides happening, going really well in terms of taking down these light cavalry and the shock cavalry who are for some reason trying to push through the pike phalanxes. Really good and kind of making up for the fact that things aren't going very well here on the flank. That enemy heavy cav unit's just sneaking through. I engaged Cretheus against him, but he couldn't stop them apparently. They just kept busting through our formation and have run all the way onto our back lines. Our units being in the way didn't stop them, and now they're in amongst the artillery. That's not good at all. They're going to drop their pieces and start fighting in melee against those super heavy cav. That's not going to go very well for them at all, but because that enemy unit's now kind of spread out and engaging lots of my light units at once, I make a downhill charge with all of my remaining cav in order to just try and hit it while I can. To do that, I need to distract the enemy's spears, who have outflanked me quite cleverly, and the only thing I can do is send in the dog handlers. The dog handlers are an elite unit because they're so well trained, so they actually fight really well in melee, and are going to be able to hold off those medium spears for long enough for Cretheus to rally all of his cavalry together and attack those enemy heavy cav. The light units will do nothing, but Cretheus' noble cav will be able to bring them down, so we did defeat them. Yes, I heard. When I'm away, it all goes down the latrine. That's how it seems. And here I was, getting settled in to become King of Gaia. We'll have to go back and save Master Cretheus. Now, of course, I'm not saying he can't defeat the whole Hayasdan Empire on his own, but on the off chance that he should be overwhelmed and fall, well, who is going to take control of Mesopotamia? I happen to have an army born and bred there, connections among the nobility, and plenty of funds to keep the violence at bay. Of course, I'm not saying that's what will happen, but we need to prepare for the worst, wouldn't you agree? Give the men another day to enjoy the comforts of the city, then let's get a move on. On the other side of the battlefield, a unit of almost dead shot cav manages to get around the enemy to take out some stray archers at the back, but most of their archers are pretty safe in amongst their reinforcement direction, firing arrows at an unengaged part of my pike line and doing a lot of damage. The pike phalanx, of course, weak against archer fire, so one unit there has lost almost half of its troops, meaning it's going to be very thin, and the enemy are going to try and exploit that by attacking with their cav. Not going to work at all, but once they get their act together and attack with infantry, that pike formation isn't really strong enough to stop the infantry from getting in amongst them and getting those kills. Meanwhile, at the back, the Pelthas now having to throw backwards into these rear attacking enemy units. They will do quite well against them. I've swamped them with my cavalry, even though they're spear units, because they're low level, that combined cavalry strength should still be able to take them out. Cretheus using his war cry ability to reduce their morale to make sure they rout before we have to kill very many of them. So there goes one unit and the other unit goes at the same time. So we've actually cleared up the enemy's rear attack there. Really big damage to our cavalry units there. A lot of them on the verge of destruction. Cretheus losing a lot of men as well. For some reason, some of the enemy's heavy cavalry are still around, or at least the ghosts of the heavy cavalry are around, just floating on our back lines. So our men are going to have to ignore the cold, steely gaze of these dead soldiers floating behind our troops as they continue the battle. My cavalry now going to exploit our one left flank by rushing out to try and go behind the enemy now that their reinforcements are mostly committed. On the other flank, though, we're about to lose because my shock cavalry only just turned in time to receive this enemy cavalry charge, but that charge is just from our superior unit. That's a very heavy shock cav unit, my unit, just a heavy shock cav unit. And although we almost have numerical advantage here, we are not going to be able to win that fight, so our unit routs. And now the enemy are going to have a free shock cavalry unit on that flank to do what they will with. So the main fight's still going okay, especially where the pikes are actually doing their job properly, because the javelins have really thinned out the enemy. So in some places they've almost actually won the fight. In others, as the enemy's reinforcements come in, it's getting a little bit hairy, especially right here in the part where the unit's already been thinned by arrows, because the pikes aren't going to hold the enemy at bay for very long, if at all. Realising this, I'm trying to get rid of their archers. You can see all my half-dead cavalry out there attacking the archer units, not doing all that much damage because my units are now so small. I'm splitting this force up, trying to get multiple archer units, but the enemy still have troops back here. These legionaries using their javelins to cut down my cav as they go by. They've also got a spear unit hanging around at the back. So unfortunately I was unable to actually engage all of their archers. The spears were too close. So we aren't going to be able to stop that archer fire, which means they're going to continue to thin out our pike ranks, which is not good. They're also going to start firing at Cretheus pretty soon. Starting to see some enemy routes here among their lower grade troops, and in come those shock cav who won my right flank, not making a particularly good charge, just hitting the edge of our main line there. These reserve pelters going to turn and engage them since they are only shock cav, relatively easily to take down in melee once they're locked in. Cretheus now taking archer fire, his unit already weak from being in combat. Those archers going to thin it out even more and of course risk killing Cretheus himself, currently guarding himself with a shield back there. We make a revenge attack here on the right flank with some of the cav who've given up on chasing the enemy's archers, so we're going to clear up their infantry by just destroying them here, and that's going to free up a spear unit to make sure we have some security here on the right flank. The enemy still have more troops coming in, including this not particularly good looking spear unit, so I think we're pretty safe now on the right, now that the shock cav have also sacrificed themselves. Further up the line though, not looking good for that pike unit that's already weak, as the enemy's infantry are about to break through. Just 1 man thick and 0 men thick in some places. The line is not holding very strong. A couple of guys managing to keep the enemy at a distance with their pikes, but overall that unit now really should have broken, but Cretheus' morale bonuses he's providing to them mean we're still fighting on with basically no troops left. Further along the line, we're sort of surrounding the enemy using peltists to fight the enemy on multiple fronts, but the enemy's high discipline means that's not going to make too much difference to their morale. More nearly dead cavalry units, really desperately trying to take down some of these archers, and at the very least just keep them moving so they're not firing at my line, and they are succeeding in that at least. And when they do catch them in melee, these enemy archers are very weak, so even a tiny unit of cav will eventually defeat them. Cretheus now reaching the enemy's rear as well. He's just going to attack routing units for now. Those high-level units will come back from routing. They have quite a lot of their troops left in most cases, about half, and we definitely need to bring them down to a lower strength to make sure they go away. On the right side though, we're now ready to leverage our advantage. We've got all of the enemy locked down, and we've got troops ready to forward and hit the enemy from behind right there. And when we do, it's going to do a lot of damage, especially to these weaker units who don't have very good morale. This one routing immediately as the pelters come in to rear attack them, routing into the pike phalanx who just start doing close order sword work, and we're going to slaughter that unit entirely, freeing up that pike unit to continue helping out with our rear folding action. Going to keep going up the line, going to rear attack as many enemy units as possible. And some of them will stay. They are sufficiently disciplined that we aren't going to be able to defeat them by just doing this, but some of them will go at least, and that's going to start turning the numbers back into our favour. This unit of spears has been drawn away from the battle by Cretheus, just sitting on the edge of the map, and it's taking ballista fire the whole time. So I'm going to keep just running away from that heavy spear unit and make sure that Cretheus doesn't get caught. Getting pretty close there, but I noticed just in time. So I'm just going to play that spear unit and make sure it gets destroyed by my ballistas before it engages. So now, back to those pikes, still fighting on, very good morale thanks to Cretheus no doubt, but they can't fight forever, at the very least because they're going to actually run out of men, and here is the point where they actually leave. They turn around and put peltists behind them. Previously it was just archers, which would not have been very good. Peltists will be able to hold the enemy in position for a while longer now. Of course we're going to lose that fight. That's legionaries fighting against peltists and dog handlers, so we're going to need to do something here. They just need to hold long enough for us to slam into the backs of as many enemy units as possible and try and drive some of them away to free up more troops. You don't need to keep telling me. Building my reputation is at the forefront of my mind, but what can I do? I'm not Eusebius, and that fact alone is enough to throw me to the wolves as far as the men and half the council are concerned. And none of you, for all your words, have any cogent ideas on how I can make my name in the Republic. Every day a feeling grows inside me, a feeling like I do not wish to return there. I'd like to stay here on the steps and rule those people loyal to me. It's already more than I can rightfully ask for. But I know what you're going to say. I should step in to replace Cretheus when he falls. Well, friends, I say he will not fall. If there is another Eusebius, Cretheus is his name. I do not wish to step into his shadow as well. As we find success on the right, units are going to come around to rear attack on the left, our left that is. Here you can see a unit of thorax hoplites with formation attack turned off, turning them into killing machines. They'll stay out of formation, meaning their defense will be low, their attack will be high, and they immediately drive off some of the enemy units as they come into contact with them. Very good news. And now they're going to come in to fight these enemy heavy swords, which have been held in place by these pelters for a long time. The pelters on the verge of destruction. Another case where I think they should have routed, but being in Cretheus' army grants so many bonuses that they've been fighting on and making sure those enemies stay right where they are. Now, the thorax hoplites should do okay against them. In a hoplite phalanx, they would do worse, so I'm going to allow them to stay outside of the phalanx with no formation. Meanwhile, the few survivors of my cavalry units attempting rear attacks on the enemy, but they are not very effective. We hit the back of an enemy pike unit, didn't really do any damage. We got their morale down, but it's not down far enough. That unit is not scared enough to be routed by a rear attack, so we're going to have to leave and try again later once a few more of their troops are dead or more of their other regiments have left. There go those pelters, routing just after we finally reinforced their position, and those spears who were chasing Cretheus going in there to reinforce that battle with my thorax hoplites. Not the best fight actually, the enemy fighting downhill against me, they may do okay there. Those pelters trying to hold the breach in the line, doing okay, not even that many losses fighting against the enemy, probably because the enemy are so exhausted, so that is good news. We've bought a lot of time, easily enough time to finish off the enemy I believe, so we're now hitting them with final rear charges, just trying to get rid of those pikes since they're so exposed, and as they go, they rout the unit that was in front of them, and as they go, that's a chain rout. The rest of the enemy's army leave. They've lost too much of their massive force to keep fighting, so although they may have just about had advantages at some points along the fight there, if they'd kept going, I think we were going to win in the end. So good result for us, a close victory. Many losses on our side, but many more losses for the enemy. And you know, our replenishment is through the roof and we're in our own territory. So as long as we have most of our regiments alive, we're going to be fine. And in fact, all of them are still alive. For the enemy, it's quite the opposite. They lost about 5 times the amount of troops that we lost. Our army looking like it's in bad shape, but every regiment alive, so in a few turns we'll actually be right back to shape. The enemy looking really bad. Many regiments destroyed, most of them, just a couple going to come away, and from that last army, no survivors. We got them all. We're going to send all of our captives away as slaves, and the enemy's remaining troops fall back. So, fantastic result for Cretheus. Right after that, Hayasdan making another attack, though. They're attacking Edessa with their weakened force from Hatra, and as it turns out, they did not gather enough strength before making this attack. Their really damaged army is overwhelmed by my garrison in terms of strength, so I can get a decisive victory off a straight auto-resolve. The enemy losing half their army there. Our force is still in good shape, the enemy falling back in shame. A bad move from Hayasdan. So that's the end of their turn. Hayasdan have done a lot of damage, and now there's another suicide attack to have a quick look at. Gahaya coming in with their last remaining army for an attack on Massalia. I've now got my fleet, the remainder of my fleet there as well, to reinforce the garrison, and the garrison has already beat this army on its own. So a quick auto-resolve again. Wipes out basically that entire army except their very high-level general, who is just about going to get away, but he's going off into the desert to take attrition. Overall, this is all looking fine. The war spreading east from Mesopotamia was starting to brew trouble in the states the violence now bordered. Massalia's former enemy, Parthava, along with their Persian kin, were suffering from the disruption of their trade with the Hayasdan Empire. Reports of battle after battle being fought in the war led many of their military leaders to believe the Massalians were starting to run out of stamina. If there was a chance for Parthava to reclaim their lands, and a chance for Persia to counter the growing threat to their domain, it was going to be during this decisive period of the war. Serious consideration was being put into a surprise attack, and the Massalians, busy with threats on all fronts already, had nothing prepared to stop them.